I would like to take a moment before we get into today's main episode and to talk about my sponsor for the podcast. Podmatch is a new podcasting site dedicated to all podcasters. The platform helps hosts get connected with potential guests to appear on their show, as well as allow guests to find podcasts that will give them a chance to share their story. Podmatch offers many tools to help organize your page, from to-do lists to episode planning to potentially appearing on a leaderboard. Podmatch has it all. The best part, you have the potential to get paid. And who doesn't like to get paid from home? I like to. With an easy sign up, you can start connecting with podcasters and guests immediately. I have been a part of Podmatch since the beginning of May, and I have got to say that it was the best decision I've ever made because Podmatch helps your podcast grow. It helps you get connected with people that have very interesting, very compelling background stories that are just waiting for their story to be shared. So if you are a host or guest and would like to start building professional relationships, explore more opportunities, and have your story shared, I highly suggest that you sign up with Podmatch today by going to joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to start expanding your network in seconds. I would like to give another huge thank you to Podmatch for sponsoring this episode. Now on to our main episode, and again, you can sign up at joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to begin your podcasting journey today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Lethal Venom Podcast, the show where I talk about anything I want with the honest to God truth, no lies told. Today, I'm joined by Mr. Paul Skidmore. Paul is an author and filmmaker from Tennessee. He's the author of short stories including Kindling, Ciao, and his most famous, The Darkness Rolled Over Her, and a novel, God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen. In 2020, he adopted The Darkness Rolled Over Her into a feature film, which is expected to be released this year. The film was produced on a modest budget with a small but passionate crew, and Skidmore hopes the film will have a big impact, saving lives, making friends for life, and encouraging everyone to keep moving. An ebook of the short story is available for free today, along with a fun discussion guide at fivecoffeesandabook.com. Read the story with a friend and talk about it. His friends call him Skidmore Skid, and yes, he'd have love to have coffee with you. So, Paul, thank you so much for coming on today to tell me a lot about your book and movie coming up. Um, it's going to be an honor, and I cannot wait for our conversation today. So, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, if you could, for my listeners, go a little bit more into detail about what you do and a little bit more about your background in writing.
Sure. So, I've loved stories since I was a kid. At 5 years old, mom had me doing the local storytelling contest and at the local library. Um, I think the very first one I did, I won my age group. I think I was the only one in my age group, but we'll ignore that part. But I enjoyed telling stories in front of people, and I enjoyed making people laugh and making people think. And anytime we were able to do any kind of creative project uh, in school, I always tried to do some kind of story. Even in college, one of the exam essays that I wrote in story format because it was relevant to what we were doing, and the teacher really liked that. So I've always just really been interested in stories, particularly in movies. So I was born in 1978. So about the time that I was 5 years old, 6 years old, the big movies were Star Wars, Back to the Future, Goonies, Superman the movie, just sort of classics from the 80s. And as I became a teenager, move into the early 90s, and you got Jurassic Park and things like that. And so I just really loved the movies. And as a kid, I wanted to sort of live in those world and be those characters. But as I grew up and realized that those things didn't exist, those things weren't real, then I realized the closest that I could get was to be a filmmaker and create those worlds myself and tell stories in those worlds and those sorts of things. So I got very interested in particular because of Jurassic Park, I got very interested in computer animation. So I was one of the first people that I knew that had a copy of 3D Studio Max and was animating things and doing things on my computer. And when I got to college, um, my brother is several years older than me and had we went to the same university, but he had graduated and left before I showed up. There was about a year gap or so between us. But when I showed up, my brother had directed the drama troupe at the Christian Student Center there. And so when I showed up at the Christian Student Center, they said, "Well, you're going to direct the drama troupe, right?" And I was like, "I guess. I don't know. Sure." So my freshman year, I started doing that. And that's when I really, really got a passion for directing actors and really telling a story through performance and staging and things like that. And we did some really cool stuff in that group and also wrote some of our own things, which was a lot of fun. So I spent 2 years at Memphis. I was actually a music ed major when I was in college because I was interested in music also. And after 2 years, I guess, I don't know, something in my mind was like, you have to remember at this time it was sort of mid 90s, 96, 97 was when I was in Memphis. So at that time, not everybody thought they could be a filmmaker. Not, there was no YouTube, there was no, it was none of that stuff. So, sort of in the back of my mind, I was like, oh, well, that's something that other people do. And I guess, you get your first internet connection in high school, college, and suddenly, pictures on the internet are a thing, and you start seeing pictures of these directors, Robert Zemeckis and Steven Spielberg and George Lucas and Steven Soderbergh, and you're looking at these pictures and you're thinking, man, these guys kind of look like huge nerds. Like I'm a huge nerd. I think I could do this. And so I decided I just need to learn how. I need to essentially go to a trade school, and I researched film schools. I went to University of North Carolina School of the Arts and learned how to make movies there. Got a really great education from real filmmakers that had real world experience, a lot of wisdom, and made a lot of good friends there, friends that are still working and very successful in the industry today. And afterward, I just knew I didn't want to go to LA and do the Hollywood thing. I knew I wanted to do sort of my own independent thing here in Tennessee. So I came back home and did some more learning and worked with some local people that I found, and essentially have been doing various video and film production jobs, for the last 20 years or so as I've worked on what I want to do, like my real passion. And a few years ago, that turned into doing the short stories. And I think people were surprised when the short stories came out because they were like, "Oh, I didn't know you wrote." And it's like, well, I write all the time. But then I realized they don't ever see what I write. They see the product of what I write. This, I write a script and then it becomes a video or something like that. But so I had the short stories and got a good reception of that. Particularly The Darkness Rolled Over Her got a really good reception and continues to. And once I've wanted to make my own film, but all of my ideas that I've had were just require too big a budget for what I feel like I'd be able to raise. Until I wrote The Darkness Rolled Over Her. After I was done writing it and saw that it was getting a good reception and saw that it had turned out well, I thought, man, there's not but like 4 or 5 people in this story, and it's all outside during the day. I've already got a camera, I've got a microphone from my freelance business. I've got all the equipment essentially that we would need to do it. I think we can make a movie of this, just evenings, weekends, whatever, if I can find the right people. And so that's what we did. That's what we launched out and did. Pre-production was less than a month. We went from August 17th. I sat down with my friend Noah Woodard, who helped me helped me do everything with the movie. I sat down with him August 17th, 2020, and said, I think we could make a movie out of this. And September 16th, 2020, that was our first day of production. So it just went insanely fast. We shot 18 days over a month and a half, and now we've been in post production for 5 years, and so, but we're coming up on the end. We're about to finish up now. So this is the realization of, to kind of sum up what I dreamed of when I was 5 years old. This is the summation of not wanting to go to Hollywood at the end of graduating film school. This will be my first feature film that I've written and produced and directed, and I'm really excited to be wrapping it up, and I can't wait for everybody to see it.
That's such a huge, inspirational story. Do you remember the first? story that you wrote when you first started your writing journey? And did you always knew that you could essentially write?
I've always felt like a good writer. But everybody thinks they have a good sense of humor and good taste in music and that they're a good driver, those kind of things. But I always got good feedback from teachers and stuff on my writing. So I felt like there was something there. There was something pretty good. Um, and Typically how I've written in the past, which is why I've not written as much as I would like. Typically how I've written in the past is everything just kind of stews in here, sort of like a big stew. And then at some point it'll just kind of boil over, and it's almost like pulling the plug out of the bottom of a sink, and it just comes out onto the paper. And so if you read Kindling, my first short story, that's a story that I had in my mind for like 10 years as like a short film. So I'd seen all the events, or a lot of the events, and I had to come up with some new things in order to make it a complete story and turn it into prose and things like that. But if you read Kindling, you're basically reading sort of a lightly edited first draft. I mean, when I sit down to write, I write what I write, and that's pretty much what it is. I'm not opposed to editing stuff. Certainly with my scripts, I'll go back and I'll re-edit some things, but by the time I sit down to write, I kind of know what I want to do. Um, but you asked about my first story. Kindling is the first short story, recently the first thing that I've released. Um, I have was at my parents a while back. We were going through some boxes, and when we were in, I don't know, like second grade or something, they would have us make books, write stories, and they would copy them off, and then we would color with crayons on the page, and then they would cut them up and make them into books, and then they had them in the library. We could go look at them, and they made a copy up for us to bring home. So I the first story that I have record of writing is about I think it's Tilly the tiger or Timmy the tiger or something has a toothache, and it's about this tiger that goes to the dentist or something. And so I have these second grade crayon drawings of this story, and I wrote another story about our librarian, Mr. Finley, who was kind of this uptight kind of nerdy librarian man, but I thought he was great. And I wrote a story about sort of the his a day in his life. And at one point, I had him walking on his nose hairs, and I had these long nose hairs coming out of his nose like little feet, and he was walking on them. I'm not sure what made me think of that as a kid, but he got a big kick out of that. He thought it was hilarious, and my mom still laughs about it. So, I've been writing in some form since I was little, but the first successful thing that I've really pushed out to other people was Kindling, and that was 2018, May of 2018, I think, is when that came out.
So going into a little bit more detail about your recent one, The Darkness Rolled Over Her. Tell me a little bit more about what that story is and why you decided to make this one into a feature film.
Yeah. Well, very quickly, the story is based around the main character, Gwen. Gwen's a middle-aged woman. She has decided to take her own life. You read that in the first page of the book. And but she kind of wants to say goodbye to some friends, and she's got this weekend trip planned. So her plan is, I'll go on this trip, and when I come home, I'll do it. And the trip is a fly fishing retreat, and it's a version of a yearly trip that she goes on with these same women. So she goes on this fly fishing retreat, has never been fly fishing before. She gets paired up with this old fly fisherman named Roy, and Gwen and Roy's conversation throughout the day really starts to challenge Gwen's decision. And also on this trip, there's a young woman named Sam. And when Gwen looks at Sam, she thinks, there's somebody, I was where she is at her age. I don't want her to be where I am at my age, but I don't know what to do about that. And so, sort of wanting to do something to help Sam is another thing that sort of challenges her decision. So, the story sort of becomes a three-way tension between Gwen's decision that she's made of what she's going to do, the things that Roy is telling her and showing her, and her heart for this young girl, Sam. And um, the story came from it sort of took on a mind of its own. My dad is a fly fisherman, and um, he helped out a buddy of his as a guide on a trip like this once, and thought it was really neat. Came home and told us about it. His whole story about about it was 2 minutes. But for some reason, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I was like, this is a really neat organization. This is a really neat program, and what happens to the people in this program, and what do they think of my dad, and what all was going on, and as I thought about it, it just kind of rolled over and snowballed. And when I tell a story, sometimes I have something in my mind that's like something of entertainment value. This would be a cool thing. Now I need to write a story around it, or this would be a funny thing. Where can I fit this in a story or something? But generally, when I sit down to like write something, I have something I want to leave with the reader. God Rest You Merry Gentlemen my novel. It's a Cold War Christmas story. It takes place on Christmas Eve, and they're having a Christmas Eve party when all the red lights and the alarm goes off and the red phone rings. So that story deals with some concepts of war, but the real story is about the sort of the war going inside the main character David, and how he doesn't really feel peace as a person. Um, Kindling is a story about a marriage that is going through some issues, but the plot is about this guy at home by himself all day until he gets trapped out in the woods, and now he's hunted by this deadly beast. But what it really ends up being about is resentment. He's got this resentment for his wife, and if you don't deal with that resentment, then it's going to eat your marriage, essentially, is sort of the metaphor there. Um, so all of my stories generally have some kind of point that I want to leave you. Otherwise, I feel like I'm just wasting your time. Otherwise, it's like when somebody tells you their dream, and it's like, okay, that's crazy, but you're just wasting my time, and this is boring, and I don't want to listen to it. Um, so with The Darkness Rolled Over Her, I thought, okay, I have this sort of setting, but I don't really know what to do. How to turn that into any kind of story. The reason I even wanted to turn it into a story was I'd already put out Kindling, and at the time it was not really didn't make sense to do it as a paperback, but everybody was wanting paperbacks. They wanted to touch the story. They didn't want an ebook. So I was like, okay, well, maybe if I write a bunch of short stories, I've got some other little short things in my mind. Maybe if I can crank those out, I can get a little anthology and I can print that. And so I had this. I thought, oh, maybe I can turn this into a story. I remember Dad taking me fly fishing, and he will be at a little hole. He'll cast into the hole a couple of times. If nothing hits, he moves on. He has buddies that'll stick around there for a few minutes, and they get kind of frustrated with him because he's like, I'm out of here. I mean, he's been doing it 70 years. He turns 80 in November, and he's literally probably been fly fishing for 70 years. So, he's like, if they're not hitting, they're not hitting. So I'm moving on to the next place. And so he'll in a few hours he'll walk, you know, 2 or 3 miles upstream. We're talking East Tennessee mountain rivers where you're going over big rocks and going uphill, and some of these places, once you get down in the water, like you can't get back out for another like mile and a half. And even at his age, I mean, he's in his waders, he's got his walking stick in one hand and he's casting with the other hand, and he's an expert at it. But he would take me to and show me how to do it a time or two. And the thing that I remembered was you don't stop moving. And the fishing that I'd done previously, you'd sit on a rock and you'd have a can of corn or whatever, and you'd sit there for hours. But with this, you're in the water, you're moving upstream, and it just doesn't stop. And so that theme of keep moving became very apparent the more I thought about it. And so I thought, okay, well, I need to write a parable essentially of someone who's decided to stop moving. And that idea of keep moving connected with a lot of things that I was feeling in my personal life as someone that has struggled with just disappointment and different kinds of depression. Nothing like not like a clinical depression or anything, but just we all have times when things aren't great. And that's sort of something that I learned is sometimes you just have to kind of keep moving through it. The only way out is through kind of thing. And so the story started to snowball around that. And because I had selected a character that had decided to stop moving, it eventually went to this place where we were dealing with the topic of suicide, which is a pretty serious topic. I've never personally been what I would consider suicidal, but I know there have definitely been days that I can point to on the calendar even where I woke up and stared at the ceiling and thought, hey, if today is going to be like the last 100 days, I don't really want to do this anymore. Like I don't, I'm not going to do anything, but if God wants to push me in front of a bus or something, that'd be okay. I don't, just didn't feel like, um, it's not that I wanted to stop living. I just wanted to stop living the life that I had. I wanted something had to change. And so, I think when people get to that place, some people feel like, one of the choices is to stop moving, and other people feel like the choice is to make some changes, make some serious changes, And so then the story really took on a life of its own from there. Once I realized it was about a pretty serious topic, I reached out to some friends of mine that I know are, close to that topic. I have two friends that have attempted and lived, thank God. And they were very kind in reading early drafts and giving me feedback and giving me some notes and some suggestions, which I worked into the story. And I was very thankful that they were willing to do that. And it made the story better. I have another friend that lost a family member through suicide, and she was very open about, um, living with that person beforehand and living without him afterward, and all the different feelings that come along with that. And then I had another friend that was a counselor and had counseled people through times like that. And she gave me really good tips from the counseling point of view about how to respond to people and things of that nature, which I tried to work into some of the tangential characters like Roy and Gwen's neighbor, Mrs. Hiddlemeyer. I tried to have them model appropriate ways of responding to someone that's in kind of a crisis. But all that stuff worked its way into the story. And when I got done with the story, I knew that I had something important. And I just can't take credit for it. I don't remember ever sitting around going, oh, I know what I'll write about. This will be a good idea. I just sort of went through the process. Um, I don't want to get too frou-frou about it or anything, but it's like sometimes you sit down to write, and sometimes you feel like you sit down to put down what needs to be written. And this story was the latter. I just when I got done with it, I sat back and thought, man, I've got something really special here, and which again fed into maybe this would be important enough that we could make a film out of it.
Between the stories that you've posted and everything that you've wrote, what's been the overall critical reception you've received from the stories you have published?
Yeah, so everything that I've published is just self-published, just completely independent. So my audience is small. It's mostly people that I know in person. It has gotten outside of that a little bit, particularly with The Darkness Rolled Over Her. But you can go on Goodreads and there's a couple of reviews on there that are pretty good. Um, but there's not going to be any New York Times or anything like that. There's nothing like that going on, not yet. But for me, the best responses have been like people that have read The Darkness Rolled Over Her and have texted me or have stopped me in person to tell me the experience that they had with the book. That's really what means a lot to me. And in fact, I had a friend shortly after I published the book that this was somebody that I've known my whole life. We've never been friends. Our moms were good friends. But somebody that I'd known. But she stopped me and she said, oh, I read the book. And as we got talking, she just very almost comfortably began talking about some of the things that she'd felt in her own life. And as she's telling me, I'm thinking, this is probably not stuff that she tells everybody. But I could tell that she felt comfortable telling me because she'd read the book and she knew I knew what those things were like, that I could understand that I could receive that without any kind of judgment or anything. And so then that freed me up. That made me feel comfortable in maybe sharing some things from my life also. And it was short, it wasn't super intimate or anything, but we had a short, very personal conversation just in the hallway in passing. And after that, I just thought, wow, like, how do I get everybody that's read the book to have that conversation? That's what I want to I'd rather them do that than read the book even. That's the whole point here is to get people to have a relationship with each other. That's sort of one of the main themes of the book. And so that summer, then after that, after the book came out in March, I guess. And so then that summer, I worked with a friend of mine and we developed Five Coffees in a Book, which is a little 5 week little mini book club around the book so that you would read the book and talk about it with a friend and go through it with them. And so the groups that I know of that have gone through it, some of them have been friends going into it and found out by week 2 or 3, there's a level of friendship that I can get to that I didn't even know I could have. And Five Coffees in a Book was allowing them to do that because the questions are kind of guided to let you kind of get comfortable and open up. And so, as far as I'm concerned, because of responses like that, the book has been really successful, and I think that the movie will be as well. The movie I hope breaks out a little wider because we need to make some money back on the movie. But the ebook I'm giving away for free. The Five Coffees in a Book discussion guide, that's all for free. You go to fivecoffeesinabook.com, you get the Darkness Rolled Over Her ebook for free. You get the discussion guide for free because I want people to have that experience. I want people to experience not just reading the book, but I want them to read the book with someone else and have that experience of sort of sharing those ideas and sharing all that with another person. That's the response that I'm interested in. I don't care if somebody says, well, it was written poorly or whatever. Okay, fine. But that's the response that I'm interested in. Again, that's what I sit down to write. When I sit down to write, I'm thinking, what am I leaving? How am I going to improve the life of the person reading the story or watching this film? How are they going to be better off for having spent the couple of hours, with this piece of material?
What do you have planned for the future? Do you plan on making any other stories into a film production, or are you currently working on any other stories that you can share?
Yeah, yeah. So the Darkness Rolled Over Her, I hope will be out this year. The year's quickly going by. We're sort of in the last phases, and we're trying to ramp up and get it out by the end of the year. Um, the next movie I'd like to make, it's going to require more budget. Um, we can't, the Darkness Rolled Over Her. We made our crew was 3 people most most days. It was super small. Um, and it was fun and it was amazing and it was incredible and I never want to do it again. I don't, I want 30 to 50 people in my next set, which means you got to pay them. You got to pay all those people and you got to feed them and everything. So we're gonna have to have a pretty sizable budget for the next things that we do. But I'd like to make the God Rest You Merry Gentlemen as my next film. When I got done writing it, it's a story that I'd had in my mind for a while and it was a little different in my mind than the story that I actually ended up writing. But after I got done writing it, once again, I thought, here's a story that takes place basically in one room. There's a couple of little rooms off of the main room that some things happen in, but it's basically happens in one big room, and most of the story happens in real time over the course of a few hours. So, as a film, build one big set. There's no cars, there's no period hairstyle. Even though it takes place in 1955, you don't have to worry about dresses and hairstyles and cars and that sort of thing. So even though it will require a little more budget, I would like to do that next. I think that makes sense to do next. And then yeah, I've got tons of films and series that I've wanted to do for 10, 20 years. I do have 2 other novels that I'm working on that were just require a lot of research and thinking, sort of slowly working on those. One of those novels is actually the very first thing I started writing back in, I guess it was the end of 2017 when I really started actually writing books. And it was a character, it's a figure from the Old Testament that there's about 3 verses about, but he really fascinates me. And so I had just worked a job for a few years that I just quit. They gave me some like 3 months severance, and I was just burnt out creatively from that job. So I spent the first month literally just sleeping. Like I would wake up to eat breakfast and go back to bed. I'd wake up to eat lunch and go back to bed. I'd wake up to eat dinner and go back to bed. And I just basically spent a whole month just recovering, just sleeping and eating and watching television. And so at the end of that month, I was getting kind of sick of that. And so there was one night, it was like 2:30 in the morning, and I couldn't sleep because I'd slept all day, I guess. And I'm just staring at the ceiling, and I'm thinking about this guy, this guy that there's no information about. And I'm just imagining his life and what his experience was, and did he have a family, and what did he do after what I read about, and things like this. And um, I thought, well, I'm not sleeping, so I'm going to get up. I'm going to get dressed. I'm just going to go to Waffle House with my iPad, and I'm just going to write down all these things that I'm thinking about. And so I did. I got up and got a booth at the Waffle House and got me some coffee and sat there and I wrote 3,500 words the first night as like a chapter one. And I went back the next night and wrote like 1,500 words. And I did that a few nights in a row. And at that point, I realized I'm not just getting stuff out of me, but I'm actually creating something here. And after I had about 10 chapters of what I figured would probably be like a 40 chapter novel, I thought, this is a big deal and this is pretty important. And I know storytelling, but I don't really know books and the book world and all that. And I don't know what I'm doing. So maybe I should start with something smaller first. And so that's when I sort of shelved that and then started writing Kindling. But I think about it all the time. And every now and then I'll have an idea and I'll jump into that. I use Scrivener to write with. I don't know if you know what Scrivener is, but it's sort of a binder. Rather than writing in a linear document like in Microsoft Word, it's like a binder
Mm.
format. So you've got all these separate documents in there that you can look at linearly if you want, but you can just go in and write on one scene at a time or whatever, or make notes to the side and that sort of thing. And so I'll jump in there all the time. There's the section that's the manuscript, and then there's a section that's like all your notes and stuff. And so I'll jump in there and I'll drop notes or I'll drop links to stuff that I find. And so I've got that. I've got another story that also is sort of like an ancient, it's set in first century, like Israel Palestine area. And so any kind of research or anything that I find, I'll go in there and I'm writing on that one constantly as well. And would I like to do movies or series of those? Yeah, I think so. I think that would be fun. But right now they're just books. But then like I said, I've got other movies I wanted to make for a long time. I've got several series ideas that I've been working on and chipping away. Things that I think began as feature films because that was all I was really interested in. But then we moved into this golden age of television, starting with a lot of the AMC shows like Mad Men. HBO was doing some stuff too, kind of with The Sopranos or whatever. So, in the early part of this millennium, television kind of took it up a notch from sitcoms and soap operas and started making really great stuff. And now a lot of the best stuff you see is on television. Now a lot of the movies aren't that great.
Mm.
Um, I think it's kind of like you know, in Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and Charles Dickens, as I understand it, released their books chapter at a time in the newspaper. And so that was one reason why you'd go buy the paper is to get the latest installment of, David Copperfield or whatever, or Sherlock Holmes. And so essentially each chapter of the book is like an episode of the show that they release. So this was obviously way back before television. So this was sort of like series television of the time, was you would go to get the newspaper and get the story. And then when it was done, then it would be re-edited and compiled as a book, and then you could go buy the book, kind of like buying the DVD set. Um, and now that we're able to do, I guess it's because of the technology's cheaper or something, or there's more people interested in it, or I don't know what. But now that television series can be well done, things like Breaking Bad or Lost or whatever. Now that things can be well done on television, um, we're seeing the only movies that really last are the big spectacle things, superhero movies, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, those kinds of things. Um, but if you're telling stories about people, television series seem to be the way to go. And if you look at just books, that kind of makes sense. You don't really see a graphic novel about two people falling in love. Graphic novels are about superheroes. If you're going to look at something visual and condensed, it's going to be a big fantastical story. It's going to be fantasy. It's going to be superhero. It's going to be Star Wars, something like that. But if you're going to read a story about character arcs and things like that, it's going to be in a book form. I think that's where we're seeing media kind of shake out now. I think maybe movies, because they're very visual and very condensed, will be for big spectacle things, or maybe like maybe some short story stuff for like independent film kind of things. But if you really want to sit down and tell a story and go through some characters, you're going to do it as a series. So a lot of things that I always wanted to do as a movie and wondered how I was going to cram it into 2 or 3 hours. Now I'm feeling a lot more freedom that, oh, I don't have to do it in 2 hours. I can do it in 30 hours, or 60 hours. I can do it as a TV series with multiple seasons.
If people would like to, for people that want to find your books and would like to read a little bit more, and just if they find any of the stories that you've mentioned interest in, are your books available wherever books are sold, or is it only through your website? Where can people find it?
Yeah, the paperbacks are only on Amazon right now. Um, because when I was first doing the self-publishing, that's all I knew how to do was to get on Amazon and do the Kindle self-publishing stuff. Um, as I have learned about it, their print on demand stuff that Amazon does, a lot of their books are printed through Ingram, which is actually just up the road from me here in Tennessee. Um, Ingram prints a lot of the books that you will see in the bookstore. They're a major printing place. Um, a lot of the self-published books anyway that you would see in the bookstore. So Ingram also has their own self-publishing thing that I would like to get into. Ingram Spark, I think is what it's called. And if I did that, then I would be able to be in more bookstores and things like that. So that's one of my goals is to transition everything over there, but I haven't done that yet. So right now, paperbacks only are on Amazon. Ebooks are on Amazon and Apple Books. And then I've got audiobooks of Ciao and Kindling. And Kindling is on Audible. And Ciao I couldn't get it on Audible for some reason. It kept getting rejected. And I was never clear what the reason was for that. But anyway, I've got a Gumroad account and Ciao is over there. I think it's a pay what you want model. And again, I would like to get everything over on Gumroad also, as far as the ebooks go, but I just haven't moved everything over there yet. It's on my to-do list. But yeah, if you go to parabolos.com, parabolos.com, it's all organized there by, you can watch my previous short films. It's got links to the books. It's got links to my Amazon author page. I've got a podcast and blog and other things that are on there. Merch, I've got different like here's my coaster for 5 coffees in a book that I've got my coffee sitting on, and I've got stickers and things, um, t-shirts and stuff like that. There's links to that on there also. You can find some of that also at fivecoffeesinabook.com, at least the stuff specifically related to The Darkness Rolled Over Her.
Well, I'll put off and to my listeners, I'll put off his links in the description box below, so it'd be easy access for them. Um, have you thought about putting your stories on Wattpad?
I don't know what that is, so tell me about it.
So Wattpad, from my understanding, it's a self-publishing thing. I don't think you really have to pay anything for it, from what I've learned. You can actually post stories on there as well. It's you can create a free account, and it's basically um a free story thing. You can actually write stories within the app as well on there. It can just I think you can post whatever. They have methods of you can do it by chapter, and then you can put like chapter one, and then if your chapter has like a name for it, you can name it there. And then you can also just write the description of it. Or you can also just copy and paste. If you write it off like a doc, or if you write it on paper, you can translate it and you can type it up on there. And I think you can also put status on it, like this is an ongoing book that there is still processing, or it's completed, or everything. And um it's a good way for people. I think there's been some books that have been published on there that have actually become like mainstream sellers as well. Um, so I've seen it as a good way for people that if they like to showcase their writing, it's a good way for authors to have their works published on there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've not heard of it. I mean, the name sounds familiar, but I don't really know anything about it. I know the guy who wrote The Martian. I mean, that's how it became popular, was he released a chapter at a time just on his blog. And so by the time the book came out, everyone his close fans had already read it and were more than happy to buy the book, which is you think, well, they've already read it. Why would they buy the book? But they were actually the first in line, to buy the book. And so things like that and things like this site that you're describing, I mean, they're really changing our idea of media and the media market and media consumption. it's a lot different now than it was. There's this guy, Kevin Kelly, and he has this article called 1000 True Fans. And so if you go search for 1000 True Fans, Kevin Kelly, you'll come across it. But his general point in the essay is, you don't need millions of people anymore to buy your stuff. You just need 1,000 true fans, and these are people that'll buy basically anything you put out. And if you can produce $100 worth of value for these 1,000 people, just $100 a year for these 1,000 people, that's $100,000 a year, and most people can live on that. And so, a lot of us that are doing sort of what I'm doing, where everything's independent, um, I think that's what we're sort of trying to get to, is trying to get those 1,000 fans. I have some true fans that'll buy pretty much anything that I put out. Not close to 1,000 yet, but slowly getting there, adding more and more as I go, and hoping that that same kind of model will work for my films as well, as long as I can keep them low budget.
Well, Paul, thank you. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with me. I know that what you have is special, and I've always told people that everyone can write. It just you have to try. It just takes a lot of practice to be able to find the niche that you have, but everyone can be a writer, and it can be a way for people to showcase their feelings and have their stories shared in, as well. So I appreciate you so much for coming on and sharing your story. It's very impactful, and I know a lot of people that would be feel very, very inspired from it.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm always glad to share whatever I can.
I will put all of his links in the description box below. I'll put his website and some links if you would like to purchase the book or download the ebook as well. I'll put all the links down below as well as his social media accounts. Feel free to follow me on social media as well. Instagram and TikTok is Lethal Venom Podcast. Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, it's Noah's Podcast on there. And you can get Lethal Venom wherever you listen to your podcast from. It's on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, iHeart, Radio, YouTube, Pandora. I mean, it's really everywhere you get podcasts. So feel free to follow the podcast to get notif- so you'll be notified of when new episodes come out. Um, Appreciate you all so much for listening. Y'all have a great day, week. Y'all be safe out there, and I'll catch you all in the next episode of Lethal Venom.